the Delicious Recap. I'm Jon Francois Andrew Vandertunt. My trusty co-host is here with us, and joining us are three of the lovely folks from the Splat Attack podcast. Do you mind introducing yourselves one by one and what you do for the podcast?
Sure. My name is Alex Nance. I am the owner slash co-host of Splat Attack.
My name's Jorde. I do a lot of the 3D design work. I also have another channel called Nostalgia Utopia. I also do some work on, it's my channel. And then there's Splat Attack. Yeah, so I do a lot of 3D work with Splat Attack. Dive into some of the stuff with my collectibles sometimes. Yeah.
I'm Catherine Jersey. Everyone calls me Cat, but saying Cat Jersey reminds me of kitten clothing. So yeah. Anyway, I'm Cat. And I am a writer and co-host for a Splat Attack podcast and an occasional cosplayer at conventions.
Wow. So we definitely have an interesting variety of personalities here. Let's just start with the basics. What is Splat Attack? If someone were to come up to you, they don't know your podcast, they want an elevator pitch, how would you describe it to them?
It is, as we like to say in every episode, it is the slime-filled past. It is very much an homage to Nickelodeon of the 90s, but not just Nickelodeon. We branch out to other things as well, like ABC and TGIF, Fox Kids, things like that. Mostly 90s Nickelodeon. And we have a lot of guests who've worked on the network. We've had directors, actors, writers, producers, game show hosts, the former CEO. We've had a lot of people from the network and just pick their brains about what it was like running the network, as well as just some top fives and favorite lists and episode reviews from other content creators, and just having a lot of fun, just reminiscing what we loved about the network then, and how things we took from it that we still hold on to today as adults.
Yeah, there's so much to love.
There is. And I need to know, I mean, getting great guests on like Phil Moore, for example, from Nick Arcade, like, how do you build that connection? How do you go from being like, fans, admirers of this content to actually having the access to talk to the people that were responsible for it?
Alex doesn't want to give away his secrets, but
Complicated answer. It
is something of a complicated answer, because Kat has watched me, like she would tell me, hey, I'd like to have this guest on the show. And I said, okay, no one's ever found this guy before. So I would go full on sleuth mode, and she would watch me find a way to get in contact. And she would be, I don't even know how you did that. I watched you do that. I don't know how you did that. But the really, really short answer is I would just find them on social media. Most of them you can find on social media. It started just as sharing pictures. Like I'd find a picture of Phil Moore from Nick Arcade, and I would share it, make a little caption, and then tag him in it. And whenever I saw certain celebrities would like or comment or respond in some way, then I knew that person or someone running that page is active and engaging with the fans. And that's where I started. I would start reaching out to these people and say, hey, we have a podcast, or I'd love to have you on and talk about your experience. And usually, I'd say 9 times out of 10, they would respond. And it's just, they're very positive and wonderful people, and they are happy to do it, because there's still people 30 years later who still appreciate what they did 30 years ago. I mean, they've moved on. They have new careers now, but what they did 30 years ago has mattered to people. And they're happy to come on various podcasts and talk about their experiences. And in some cases, once you build that relationship with somebody, and in our experience, really engage with them and make them feel welcomed and appreciate what they did. And it's not just a run-of-the-mill, hey, let's talk about this one experience. No, there's a real connection, and there's a real love and admiration for what they've done and how they've done it. And we're trying to emulate what they started. And everyone that's been on our show has been very, very gracious to come back again. Like after the end of the episode, they would almost always say, this was a lot of fun. Let me know when you want to do something else. And then they'll add the tag, let me know, and I'll see if I can find some of the other cast members. And that's how that would start. And then now it's beginning to do a networking thing. And that's very, very much how it's built throughout the last 3 years.
I think didn't you guys have like the Mystery Files of Shelby Woo cast on?
Yes, we did.
Yep, we did.
Just recently, yes, and that was a big one for I think a few of us, especially me. But any older Nick fan, I think, can kind of remember that Shelby Woo was the show. And I mean, after that, though some of those people never returned back to Nickelodeon, they were never seen on another show. So bringing them back was, for a lot of them, was the first time they ever saw the screen again. Since then, and it's just really rewarding. Like Alex is saying, to bring them all back together and have them connect. Usually through that connection, memories are sparked, and they want to bring back other people that they had connections with through Nickelodeon. And then it just becomes like a word of mouth kind of thing. So it is like hunting people down. And then once you find some people, it opens up doors to others. And I mean, but I think, yeah, like Alex was saying, genuinely, it's just a good experience all around, encourages people to want to come back. So we always try to do our best to make sure they have a really good time on the show. We focus on the most important things, I think. And then that just comes off and rubs off, and they really want to share that with the rest of everyone else at work,
I wonder if you guys are getting this sense now that people who are iconic in the 90s seem to be more appreciative of the fandom, of the passion. Like, it seemed like there was a time, maybe this was like mostly in the 2000s, where you would approach some 90s stars and talk about the work that you loved so much, and they'd be like, "Oh, God, like that's a has been, and I want to move on and grow up from that." But nowadays, I don't know. There's just something about the 2020s where you just see a lot more stars from then just embracing this passion, and I like it. So I was wondering if you guys could speak on that.
I think it's interesting because, I mean, back in the 90s, like, the internet was just becoming a thing that was accessible for people. There was no social media. There were barely chat rooms. I remember AOL.com/Nick was the Nickelodeon website hub, right? And I, didn't have internet readily available. It was like, okay, my mom needs to use the phone and it takes me 15 minutes to connect on dial-up. I can't really do anything. So the fact that, like, there weren't a lot of opportunities to reach out to these people who had an impact on my childhood, even to thank them, like fan mail, whatever, it took, however many minutes for a webpage to load to try to find this information. I think for me, it was wanting to sort of honor my inner child and thank some of the people who helped make my childhood feel really special. And there's just, with the introduction of Zoom and everything, just seems so much easier now to connect. Back in the 90s, we didn't have that. So I think something about somebody's inner child wanting to thank somebody for making their childhood, that's like, you can't say no to them.
Yeah, it's hard.
I think the vibe of our podcast, like, it comes from a pure place, right? It's a very much full circle expressing appreciation and honoring, like we say, honoring the slime-filled past.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're thanking them for making our childhood. They're thanking us for having them on and having the opportunity to connect with people and fans and connect with each other again, right? We're reuniting some casts, which is really cool. So I think just the advancing technology makes it, it makes it possible. And I think now people are appreciative of that.
And it also depends, to go back to what you were saying earlier, whereas if some just felt like, oh, I want to move on. And now there's a lot more who are reminiscing about a time long past. But in my experience, I've reached out to a lot of people. And I've only had maybe 3 people when I first started the podcast where their agent would say something along the lines of, oh, they're trying to leave that behind and pursue something different. Or I would hear it from another cast member. They don't want to be remembered as just this kid show actor. They want to be taken as a serious adult actor, and they're trying to distance themselves from that, at least at this point. And then a few months later, they'd be on a new project that would tie them back to the TV show that they were just, I'm trying to distance myself from that. Okay, now I'm back to this. But a lot of the times, and it also depends on who you ask, because if you ask, say, the All That cast, they have stayed, most of them have stayed popular. Just say, I see. Go back, baby.
Is that the kid?
Get that from your mama? Go on.
Benson.
Okay. But the All That,
Lights up when you talk about all that.
yeah. But like if you ask the All That cast, most of them have stayed busy. Like Kenan and Kel have stayed busy. Danny Tamborelli has stayed busy. Not necessarily in the limelight, but in behind the scenes, the man has done a lot of things. Josh Server has stayed busy. Laura Beth Denberg has stayed busy. You ask like the main people, they've been so busy, and they still are, and they're still very high in demand, and people want them to be on the show, and getting them to stop and go back to a time that when they were kids, when they're ready to move, not ready to move on, but they're still consistently busy. It's hard to get in touch with them and hard to differentiate yourself. But if you go towards other people, like find the shows that you can't find on Paramount Plus, because there are shows you can't find on Paramount Plus. You can't find Wienerville, Welcome Freshmen, Roundhouse, Space Cases, Journey of Alan Strange, all these great shows.
Right.
My Brother and Me. You can't find these on Paramount Plus, barely find them on Amazon. But if you reach out to those people, they're happy to talk about it because no one's reaching out to them. So you get them on the show, and they're so happy because that's fans who remember the show 30 years ago, have actively tried to find the show, and then want to reminisce about it. And now it's, I did this 30 years ago, but no one has said anything to me about the show.
Yeah.
They had no idea that it impacted people the way it did. And they're like, this is amazing. I had really? Like, I didn't even remember who I was. And here we are, like, you were my childhood. So, yeah, it's a lot of people, it's kind of, unfortunately, like the forgotten shows, like some of the best shows, I think, just aren't getting enough representation on like streaming platforms.
And even really popular ones, like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because we had the chance to ask DJ McHale, who is the creator of the show, when did you know the show was successful? And he'd said like 6 years ago, whenever people started reaching out to me after almost 30 years saying, hey, I loved the show. Would you like to be on? He had no clue. And because he did the show.
Yeah, you were in production.
And they were in Canada, so they weren't anywhere here in the States to know what was going on. And then once the show was done, he went on and started his own book series, and no one said anything to him because, like Kat had said, the internet was just a baby. And then once people started having, I can do podcasts, I can do these vidcast shows, and I can actually find some of these people. DJ McHale has his own webpage where he still sells books, and then people would reach out to him there, and that's when he realized people still love what I did. I had no idea people loved what I did 30 years ago. I didn't hear anything. Nickelodeon didn't say anything to me. But yeah, it's very, very much more so an appreciation from the people that we've reached out to, and far less, far less, I want to distance myself from it. I'm ready to move on. They still love it. It's hard to deny somebody who says, you made my childhood.
Absolutely. Can each of you take me to where you were during the so-called golden age of Nickelodeon, the 90s? Like, can you pinpoint a specific memory, a specific show that touched you enough to where you can say, like, oh yeah, that's basically a primary reason why I'm doing this podcast?
Jorde?
Well, I think I'd have to say probably the biggest impacted show first off, I experienced Nickelodeon in the 90s as a younger child. So through our podcast, we have a varying range of ages. I think it's like 10 years at most difference. But through us all, we hit the different age ranges through the 90s. And I think I'm probably the youngest during the 90s. So my experience, Rugrats, I'd say, have to be one of the biggest because Rugrats was a titan at that time. Pre-SpongeBob, Rugrats kind of owned the network, and the productization would follow you everywhere you go. The movies that were in theaters at the time, and then just coming home watching Rugrats every day, because it was like one of the main played shows. So, if anything was like the show that, like, I would say impacted me everywhere I went from Nickelodeon in the 90s, it was probably Rugrats. But that's not to say that every show didn't carry some level of importance to me. Hey Arnold was like this calm show that would like, bring you down from the energy of all the other shows that would play on the network. And I was there's so much like I feel like adult things that I learned through that show for the first time, like concepts of depression and failure and longing and lost parents, stuff like that. It's that show was very mature, so it's another show that very much connected with me in the past, and not so much in the way of like the wild, crazy slime Nickelodeon, but this more earnest side of Nickelodeon that you wouldn't find on Disney Channel or Cartoon Network, no matter how hard Disney Channel would try to make an earnest story. Sometimes it would come off a little bit shallow out of their fears to touch on more realistic aspects of those subjects, where I think Nickelodeon was willing to go a little bit farther, be a little bit more down to earth with the children. So those were the biggest impacts. And then, I mean, being a younger child, it's not like I didn't miss out on preschool blocks and all of that stuff. So I mean, you have Go-Go Island, you have Face, in between each episodes, all of the fun Blue's Clues, of course, and Blue's Clues productization was crazy too. I mean, they dominated as well. So those are kind of my perspectives with it. And then, I mean, obviously all the live action stuff. Are You Afraid of the Dark? The game shows, and Are You Afraid of the Dark was hugely pivotal to my horror development as a child, alongside Goosebumps. But Goosebumps is Nickelodeon. But it's Are You Afraid of the Dark? And Goosebumps go tandem with each other so well. So. I think I've spieled long enough on myself.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
Kat?
So yeah, Nickelodeon was pretty much always on at my house. My sister and I would that was the channel. You turn it on and it was Nickelodeon. And so even when, homesick from school, Nick Jr. was on. So as a kid, I can remember watching reruns of The Elephant Show on Nick Jr. and Eureka's Castle. So this is the early 90s, right? And I remember commercials for, the first original Nicktoons, the Doug, Ren and Stimpy Rugrats. And I think I wasn't so much a Ren and Stimpy fan, but I latched onto Rugrats and Doug, especially Doug. I've always been more of a writer, and I liked that Doug journaled like I did. And I don't know, it just felt like a very wholesome show. And that was my favorite Nicktoon. Then as I got older, I really liked the Snick lineup, and I liked Clarissa and Alex Mack and some of the more the live action, even sci-fi leaning shows. So Alan Strange and tail end of the 90s, when Animorphs came on. But 1996, Space Cases came onto the scene, and it was I had not had experience with Star Trek or even Star Wars at that point, I don't think. So that was my introduction to science fiction as a genre. And I have felt like an outcast as a kid. So it was oh, it's the group of misfits who are going to save the day. And they had this found family thing. And that just really spoke to me at where I was at 10, 11 years old. And that was sort of the gateway to the rest of science fiction fandoms. After that, I branched out into, I saw George Takei play Warlord Shank, and it was oh, he was on Star Trek. Let me watch Star Trek now. And it just, was the gateway fandom, so to speak. And there were Doctor Who references and just everything that was referenced in that show. I just needed to learn more about it because I loved the technology and fantasy of the sci-fi genre. So that was the show. That is still my show, my childhood show. And I'm so fortunate to have been able to meet some of the cast and have a cast reunion with the podcast. And it was, yeah, that is my childhood. So that was pretty early on with the high for me in terms of topics the podcast has covered before I was even a regular contributor to the podcast. But yeah, it was Nickelodeon was always on. So reruns of Legends of Hidden Temple. I remember after dinner. Are You Afraid of the Dark was one that I liked to watch when it was on Sundays in the afternoon, not so much Snick at night because I was in the basement watching and my sister would always play pranks on me and turn the lights out and lock the door. during the intro, which was scary enough as it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some core memories that involve Nickelodeon shows.
I love it. Alex?
Cases is my number one. Yep.
Yeah, I love that.
I don't have, I was going to say, I don't think I have one specific memory that just lent towards it, but I do have a couple of things. But much like Kat, it was always on. It was the network that was always on. I would branch away on Saturday mornings for Saturday morning cartoons. I would branch out to Fox Kids whenever I come home from school. And then it was back to Nickelodeon. And it was always on, no matter what I was doing. I could be sitting down in the living room floor playing with Legos. The network was on. And I was born in 85. So Nickelodeon on back then was episodes of You Can't Do That on Television. I would get up in the morning to get ready for having to go to the daycare center while Mom was in the shower getting ready, and I would be watching Mr. Wizard's World and Count Duckula and Danger Mouse first thing in the morning. I'd come home in the afternoon to watch Looney Tunes with my dad. And then I was there whenever they started, like Kat had said, when they introduced the Nicktoons and watching Salute Your Shorts with my brother. But the two things that really, my opinion, was peak Nickelodeon, and the thing that really differentiated it for me, one, outside of the programming, which really was different from everything else because it was very much the anti-Disney. This was real relatable kids that went through real relatable situations. Even if they were heightened and exaggerated, that's still what kids would go through. But the thing that really got to me more than the shows was the interstitials. Most networks didn't have anything like that. I mean, you had a block, Fox Kids, you had these really cool shows, these really cool bumpers, but then nothing in between. It was just straight commercials. Yep. Nickelodeon had a ton of stuff in between. I mean, they had the Kids Almanac, and they had Poetry in Motion. They had those little hand glove puppets, and
I think did they have like a barbershop quartet of some sort?
Yes, they did.
Yep.
They did.
Yeah.
Not to mention all the IDs that they would have. Yeah. They had Nick Days. Yeah. The Black History Month. There was they had all kinds, like they did like 3 different variations of Black History Month. One just pure educational. One time it was Kenan and Kel. Hello, there's my wife. Hey, wife. Hello. And they did all kinds of things in between, and they had Kids Pick the President. And I think Kids Pick the President was the first time, as my wife walks away grabbing the laundry, I think Kids Pick the President was really the first time, and also the Kids' Choice Awards was the first time that I realized my opinion matters. Because, yes, they had Nick News. I didn't care about Nick News. I didn't care what was going on. I know there are people that did. I didn't. But for the first time, I realized this world is my world, too. And we lost Kat.
Yeah, we did. Where did she go?
I realized that our opinion was valid, that this was our world too, and we should care about it. And yes, there's a presidential election, and I can't technically vote, but I'm going to inherit this world. I should be paying attention to what's going on. And then much later, that same kind of premise, and yeah, it was big for Kids Pick the President, but then you had the Kids' Choice Awards, because, you have the Oscars and the Emmys, and then you had music awards, but now you have Kids' Choice. Now I get to vote. I get to vote on what I like and what matters to me in pop culture. Mm-hmm. And I don't care. It's not for the grown-ups. It's for me. I get to do this. Kat just messaged. She said her internet is unstable. I'm assuming she will be back.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be here.
I can stall while you're gone. I can stall. You know I'm good at rambling.
Are we all? We're podcasters. It's
yeah, that's right. But the other thing that continued that for me was Stick Stickly, Nick in the Afternoon.
Right. The host.
Yep. Because yes, Stick Stickly was fun. And he was a great, it's a popsicle stick. And we loved Stick Stickly. Like everyone, you mentioned Stick Stickly, everyone can sing that little jingle. But everyone knows his address, where to send the postcard. But you also got to vote or send in something requesting a show that you wanted to see during that block. It's the first time, really, that Nickelodeon helped me understand that I have a voice. As a kid, I had a really, really bad self-esteem. I had a poor self-image of myself. And the kids at school would pick on me all the time. I had an older brother who would constantly just mow over everything that I was doing. My parents were always busy. It was the 90s. Our parents were always working, and I had the TV as a babysitter. And not to say I had a bad childhood, that's just the way it was. But I didn't feel valued and appreciated, and I didn't feel like what I have to say is important. Nickelodeon wanted to teach kids, yes, you are important and you should care about the world around you. And that's really where that started for me. And then once I picked up on that, then I started to notice in the TV shows, these are real people. I watch Disney and it's complete fan service. This is all wish fulfillment. Nickelodeon is all, these are real people. You can play a camp TV show over on Disney, and it's so polished, it's so clean, and it's all wish fulfillment. You go back and watch Salute Your Shorts. That's real kids.
Yeah.
And those are all real people, and they all look different. And they all go through relatable things that we all have gone through. And Pete and Pete, yes, it's suburbia, and it's really weird and very abstract, but it also it's got the core of what it means to be a kid and how observing the world around you, and it's just absurd and trying to translate. I mean, everything. And like Jorde was saying with Hey Arnold, how in very much in line with Doug, real relatable kids told in this beautiful ficticious world. And very, very much
about that. Like, what did you guys make of the emotional depth of shows like Doug and Hey Arnold? What is your take on how it was able to get made back then? Especially given this stigma of kids TV, like it has to be fast, has to be zappy, has to be fun. Like, how were shows like those created nowadays? And do we have room for that in the present day? I mean, I think maybe streaming you can get away with that stuff, but on network TV or cable TV nowadays, it's hard to imagine a Doug or Hey Arnold succeeding.
Hang on, Jorde. Kat said that she is in the waiting room.
All right, let's get her in.
Hey, back.
Hey.
All right, Jorde, you were the question on the table is how did we feel about Doug and Hey Arnold being made, and could they be made in today's?
Yeah, as far as the emotional depth of it,
Jorde started to answer. What was you going to say, Jorde? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, the 90s is such a great particular time when it comes to animation, because it's coming off the back of the 80s where they're discovering that this is a medium that they can essentially use to communicate to kids, and they're testing it. They tested out so many things in the 80s for toys and productization that when they got to the 90s, they were so much more open to trying other ideas. And I think that's truly why the 90s stands out for animation in particular, is because, I mean, you got such a variation of like stories that you could tell, whereas nowadays you'll never get that because, there's just not the level of industry still that exists for 2D animation, unfortunately. Back then, every network was trying to compete. They're trying to put on like at least half of their shows to be animated just because that was doing so well with younger audiences. And they didn't want to homogenize everything. So I think they ended up breaking up to like, we have to have more serious, we have to have more action based, we have to target this demographic for girls and this demographic for boys and teens and children. And through that, we got all these very, very interesting animated shows that targeted all sorts of concepts. And like Hey Arnold, Doug, the ones that, kind of tackled these more serious, down to earth lifestyles of an individual. I mean, I remember for Hey Arnold, Craig Bartlett had referenced that one of his big inspirations was the Peanuts series, Charlie Brown, because it follows this protagonist and how he's going through life and experiencing other people's lives and their problems, and he's kind of a gateway to help them kind of understand that. And found that so interesting with Arnold, because that's he would have his group of friends, but he would also break out from those group of friends, and he would go, sometimes he would join up with like the bully, or he would join up with some like person that was living in an abandoned building, or somebody that was going crazy as a monkey, and all sorts of different things, that were happening in his town. And it was like telling these little stories of a human life in all these different ways. And to get to when we get to like, like the Christmas special, where he's reuniting a father with his daughter, and so we get to more serious things of separation and depression. I think that when you're in the 90s and you're talking to kids, and you've already covered all the fun stuff, like what's left to cover, like maybe some more serious topics. And they handled it in a really good way that maybe nowadays we could still do. I know YouTube animation is huge, and people have covered some really great stories through independent animation. But it seems to me that networks are really just focused on numbers nowadays, and they don't care about as much about telling stories. They just look at IP as a mask to put over something. So when they look at like SpongeBob, like, well, that does really good numbers wise, we'll make 5 shows SpongeBob. Whereas back then they would have been a little bit more like, well, Rugrats did well, so maybe we need like 5 more gross out shows. So you get All Real Monsters, or maybe people like Classic Supo, right? So we'll get Classic Supo more, at shows. And through that, they weren't as, I don't want to say lazy, but nowadays it's definitely driven by, I think, completely different metrics where it's just they only look at numbers. They don't look at the heart of the story in the show. They don't look at what the characters in the show really are. They're just like, if it's a yellow sponge, that's what the kids want. And I think that's why, yeah, I think that's why independent animation has come up a lot on YouTube and has done really well and has broken through from YouTube back into, like Prime and Adult Swim and stuff. Like there's shows that have started purely on YouTube that have made their way to the major networks now. Through people just loving them and the earnestness of the stories that they want to tell.
Being a father, I've seen my boys watch a lot of videos on YouTube of just kids just playing. I've seen them watch these really stylized, like live action cartoons of families just going through their everyday lives, only wildly exaggerated. I still feel like there is an audience, not to mention how much things have changed in since we were kids. Kids today have a whole different environment to grow up in, and society has changed so much. There is a lot from shows like Doug and Hey Arnold that are still very relevant that kids can enjoy today and get something out of. But there's things that go on now that didn't go on back then, that there's absolutely still an audience where this could be done, and this still could capture kids' imaginations and still give them something to latch onto and learn from. There's absolutely a form for it and a need for it. But much like Jorde said, I highly doubt it will happen. I'll be very surprised if it does, but there's absolutely an audience for it, and I think the audience is hungry for it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have so many children's content creators who are doing this stuff and just trying to get subscribers on YouTube and making a good living off of it.
Right. Ever since, maybe 8th grade, my heart has been broken because I never got to visit Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando. I was wondering if any of you had that experience, because of course that's like the home of everything, everything from the 90s going into the 2000s. You have your game shows, your Slime Time Live, your Double Dare, you got your Clarissa Explains It All, your Kenan and Kel, all that. I mean, everything was filmed there. So did any of you get to visit? And if so, like, what was that like?
My heart is also broken that I did not get a chance to visit, but I'm going to live vicariously through some of the other my coworkers here, because they do have stories to tell.
Go ahead, Jorde.
Well, I will say, unfortunately, since Manny's not here tonight, but he's probably got one of the most detailed stories of his experience at Nick Studios. Instead, you got me and Kat, who have very little experience going there, and she didn't get to go. And the one time I was in Universal Studios Orlando in the 1990s, while the Nick Studios was still open, didn't get a chance to actually go inside. I got to go by the front. I got to see the slime geyser. But I was down there with my family at the time. It's a big theme park, and everybody wanted to do different stuff, and you only really got to pick one thing that we definitely got to do with the really long lines down there, and I chose Men in Black as the ride that I was gonna go on. And still, I was really, really excited off of the Men in Black movie. But yeah, I did get to go by the front. The building looked so cool. I wanted to go in, but the line literally stacked out front in the Florida heat. And so I didn't get to go in. The slime geyser is amazing. I got to see it go off a couple times. Super cool. you didn't really get to go up to it all the way because they didn't let you, but it was really cool to see it. Then many years later, I returned back to Universal Studios Orlando, and just to go try to see the building again, what remains of the building, and it's now been painted for the Blue Man Group, or had been painted for the Blue Man Group. Now they've left it, abandoned it, so it just sits there as, I guess, an employee break room or something like that.
Alex?
I did get to go when I was a kid.
Tell me about it.
And I did see the slime geyser. It was really cool to see. I was afraid to get too close because I did not want to be slimed. I was probably one of the few kids going through Nick Studios that didn't want to get slimed. But I did get to see it from a distance. It was really cool. I got to do some of those little photo op, stand-up, cutout things. I've got one where I was with the Nicktoons, where it was Ren and Stimpy, Doug and Patty, and Tommy and Chucky. And there was another one that was with Eureka's Castle. They had one just for Eureka's Castle. But going through the tour, I don't remember much of the tour. I remember two things. One, I got to see the set of Clarissa Explains It All. They were not filming, but the set lights were still on, so we got to see the living room, and that was really trippy. By this point, I knew that TV making was a process. Because I had seen certain TV shows where I'm watching the bloopers, because sometimes they have the gag, a little blooper during the credits, especially shows like Home Improvement. And you could hear the audience laughing. Sometimes the camera would follow them as they leave, and you could see the audience backstage. And it was really cool. And now I'm seeing not just the Clarissa set, but I'm seeing all the cameras and the lights, and I'm getting to see everything. And that was really cool. But I was like, that's their living room, but it's not their living room. This is so weird.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated by it. And then we got to go to Game Labs. And Game Labs at this point, I did not get to play anything. And I was really upset because I did want to play something. There was one thing I wanted to play. They had two TV sets off to the side where they were playing Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Sonic 2 had not been released yet. This was a beta version that they were using, and they were testing it on kids, or I should say kids testing it to see how the game would work and if they could use it in the second season of Nick Arcade. So I got to be there as they were testing this game out for another season of Nick Arcade, but I didn't get to play it, but I really wanted to. Those are the memories I have going through Nick Studios.
Is there a very short-lived Nickelodeon show that you guys haven't thought about for a while, and then it just pops up, I don't know, through some happenstance? Maybe somebody mentions it on social media, and you're like, oh my God, hey, I love that show. Like for me, the other day, it was Taina, that show that ran for like maybe a season, starring Christina Vidal as like an aspiring New York actress singer. Anything like that? Because I know, we have a whole pantheon of long-running Nick shows, but there always are those short-lived ones that didn't get the credit that they deserved. Like any of those that come to mind for you guys?
I will say I've been studying this stuff for years. This is going on year 3 of our podcast, and probably by the time this comes out, it will have been around for 3 years. And then I was finding all the Nickelodeon content I could find on my own for my own page for years before that. So I'm very, very, very well versed, and finding at this point, if I find a show that I've not known about, it would be a surprise. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that there isn't one, but they'd have to be like super, super deep cuts. But I will say, starting out, I had completely forgotten about My Brother and Me, which was just one season, and I thought it was a whole lot more than one season. I had completely forgotten about Wienerville, which was only 2 seasons. And let's see, there was I had completely forgotten about Roundhouse, which was 4 seasons, and I had no memory of Roundhouse at all. But then going back and rewatching the whole series, I'm going, how did I forget this show? This is flipping awesome. But there's been a handful where I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Welcome Freshman, forgot about that one too.
Yeah.
I think particularly for me, I often find myself finding like the in-betweens, like Alex had mentioned earlier. There was always these little ones that they'd try out. There was consistent ones like Stick Stickly that you'd see, but then you'd get some that are more random and like experimental, where they would be testing out new animated shows. I think there was a few Nickelodeon shows that actually first showed up as like an in-between animation and then eventually evolved into a full-fledged show, as well as one that I really, really loved, which was Snick or Treat. And not necessarily was it short-lived, but it made its return only in Octobers and eventually was, dropped by the network when calling on the phone as a kid probably stopped being a good idea in households, I guess. But it was so fun just because of the interactivity of it, the effort put in to tie in this like actually kind of logistically complicated thing where you have a 3D animated, running through a neighborhood, and this is all being done in the 90s, where it's like there's not a huge back on the technology to be doing this, so people are like, really trying hard to put this all together. And recently, like Phil Moore had brought up in an episode we had done with him, it's just so many very smart people that were willing to take the time and do stuff that like and put it into something like Nickelodeon, where they could have been at IBM or developing at Microsoft, but instead they're like, we're gonna go work at Nickelodeon Studios and make Game Lab or make like Nick or Treat or all of this stuff. It was so great. So I think Nick or Treat's probably the number one where I was like, when I reconnected with that through memory, through watching Nick Reboot about 12 years ago. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've forgotten about this, and just deep dive.
Phoebe has entered the chat.
That's the Phoebe
Yes,
again.
this is
I see your cat.
She's a 3-year-old calico, and she's going to position herself right behind me now.
I love that.
Sorry, Jorde.
Better the cat than this annoying fly
We've
that
got
keeps flying around my computer.
No.
Oh, but that's it for me right now. Kat, what do you have?
For like forgotten Nickelodeon, for me, I think it was a little bit of a drop off, like late 90s, early 2000s, when I sort of stopped watching as frequently. So for me, I think like Taina, Caitlin's Way, a couple of the shows that were just coming on during that period, I think are ones where I had forgotten. And then if I'm on one of the like Facebook groups and I see somebody, core memory unlocked, and they have an image of like the logo or something from one of those shows, it's like, yes, existed. But I think because Nickelodeon was on pretty much all the time in my house, I remembered most of it from like 1990 to 99-ish. But yeah, toward the later late 90s, I think some of those shows sort of passed me by a little bit.
You have any questions, Andrew?
I do. I wanted to know from you guys each, is there a highlight or something new that you've learned as you've been podcasting about a show that you love that made you fall in love with it even more?
Yes, there's a ton.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh
Man, I mean, just a general.
one moment.
There's so many great stuff.
Like a really big one.
Gosh. Okay, I will say, I gotta go for head honcho. I gotta go for boss lady.
Yeah.
We got to interview Geraldine Laybourne. She was the former CEO of Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I absolutely loved that she did was during the 90s, she did not want to make products based on the television properties. She's there to tell a story, not sell toys. She wanted to connect with kids and give them a voice, like I had said previously, and not looking to make money off of selling products to kids. And she saw kids as people, not as dollar signs. And one of the things that she implemented was she called it the Kids Bill of Rights. That's not fully what it was called. It was something slightly different, but still, she's pulling from a 30-year-old memory. But the whole document, which can be found online if you look for it, but the whole thing it was given to everybody who worked for the network at some point, and they had it on the wall in Nick Studios, and it was very much about what the kids' rights were as an audience. Your opinion matters. Your feelings matter. You are not a thing. You are not someone to be talked down upon. You are to be talked equal to. Like, she treated children as tiny adults. And I loved that she did that. I love that she talked about that in our show. And that one thing, that one aspect of who she was and what she did could be felt or talked about. And almost everybody else that we've had on our show that has worked with her, because all of them had said she loved kids. She was wanting to treat them as people, and she trusted her creators. She trusted me to do my job and was in full support of it. And I just loved working with Jerry. That's what they always called her. And I loved that freedom as content creators, but also respect for the audience. And that's one of the things that I have loved the most while watching the network, because we haven't really said it, and I'm just going to glance over it real quick, but there's been a lot of talk about Nickelodeon, most of it negative, in the very, very recent few months with certain documentaries. Well, not to say that that's not warranted, because it is important. It's also important to remember where it started from, and it was completely different back then. And it was all about empowering kids and not selling.
Yeah. Going off of that, I think just listening to Geraldine talk about letting creators create and needing to be creative with very little money, and just the production value we got, like the amount of money they had versus like what was created, is insane to think about. Like the quality, like the highest quality programming in terms of not talking down to kids, but talking to kids, and having programs on Nickelodeon like where one of them, there's something for everybody in the beginning, right? Because they're all vastly different. You have Pete and Pete, which is different from Clarissa, which is different from Space Cases, which is different from Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is different from Doug, et cetera, et cetera. The diversifying the programming to appeal to just kids in general, I think was very apparent in the early days of Nickelodeon, and listening to Geraldine talk, versus now when we're talking earlier about, the sponge that shall not be named, and certain creators, if one thing works from them, let's just get them to make 5 more shows, and trying to sell to kids. Seems like the thing that they're doing now. But just listening to her talk about forming the network for kids, and having been an educator and really valuing children's opinions and catering to them and getting to learn about them. And I think something that stuck with me is she said that all of the letters that she received from kids, she read them, like on her flights. She read every single one of those letters that was mailed in. And that's just like, I don't know. It's like she's like the mom of the network, right? And there was just something very much, I don't know. It's very wholesome and makes my inner child happy.
Jorde?
Yeah, so for me, I think one of the most rewarding things of like listening to these stories from, the different people we've had on the show, getting perspectives from every level of, production to actor to writer to contestant. I think what I found to be the most consistent, rewarding thing is that and Alex has kind of touched on this. It was so bootstrap, right? There were so many bootstrap things that they were doing, where they were, whether it was Pete and Pete or Legends of the Hidden Temple or Wienerville, like as a kid and as the audience, there's a lot that they try to hide from you so that it seems like this cohesive thing that they've got going, and it is. But behind the scenes, the duct tape and the people stacking shoeboxes to be a little bit taller and all that is what really made the network feel more and more enriching as you look behind the curtain. In a way that, like, Disney had so much money, they could do anything they wanted. They did give their shows lots of money. And in some ways, I feel like it spoiled those shows. Whereas Nickelodeon, like Pete and Pete, you can feel, the lack of budget sometimes, right, with Pete and Pete, but not in a bad way. Like it feels like, because they're not hyper fixating on trying to clean up the audio, they're not hyper fixating on trying to get the lighting just perfect in every shot, that you get this more earnest depiction of reality. And it was so much more relatable for that. And I appreciate that in all of the shows. And Legends of the Hidden Temple, watching, kids stumble over each other, stumble over their words, or not know, how to talk to a camera when they have an entire studio audience in front of them. It just made it so much more relatable as a kid, and it's endearing as an adult to go back and watch that they just let kids be kids on TV. They wanted to tell stories, even if it meant, they didn't have all the budget there to go full out, they would find ways to do it. And that's not saying they would always cheap out. I mean, part of doing Shelby Woo, we heard so much about what they had to do for the stunts and how much money and investment had to go into the stunts. But even there, it's a Nickelodeon show, so they're having fun, they're playing around, and you're hearing about, Pat Morita jumping on people's cars and people being flung off of boats into alligator-infested waters.
I was just gonna say one of the other really rewarding things is to hear some of these stories, because there are some really fun and fascinating stories. Because like he was saying, the creator of Shelby Woo had a boat crash and landed right in a gator land. I mean, there's gators everywhere. Steve Pernick from Shelby Woo was quite literally in a ball of fire. Lou Schneider, who was on Make the Grade, he used to cut the tag on the back of his shirt just so that way he could take it home, because they wouldn't let him take his wardrobe home. Hearing Mark Weiner saying that he would actually film guerrilla style. He took the whole camera crew into a grocery store, a supermarket in New York, just because he wanted to film there. And they had permission, but there were still actual people shopping there, and they're seeing people in giant weird costumes. I mean, hearing these stories, they're so much fun, and it's very addicting to me. It's like it's a drug. It's absolutely a drug. Hearing these wonderful stories that just they make you smile. And it's so infectious, and they're happy to share them, and it's so cool. It just rejuvenates me every time, and as soon as it's done, it was like, man, that was so fun. Who's next? Who's the next one we're going to have on the show?
Now, can each of you pinpoint a moment in a show or a show's episode that is a favorite for you, that just has kind of stayed as a staple for you, that maybe you go back and just rewatch when you want to feel good?
Yeah. I know you got one.
I'm the broken record, though. I feel like I need to think of something other than Space Cases.
Not that you did say, although it's not aired, it hasn't aired. It was one of our behind the scenes things, but you did talk about when Geraldine signed off.
Yeah, that's true. That was an adrenaline crash, I think, for everybody involved. Geraldine signed off after we're done interviewing her, and the footage we had, I had to rewatch it to make sure that this actually happened, right? So after she signs off, we're just it took a moment for us to process, and then I think each one of us just sort of put our head down on the desk, just trying to collect ourselves and be like, we just thanked this woman for our childhood. What just happened? Is this reality? So as an adult, creating the podcast, that's, there you go. As an adult working on the podcast, that is a moment that definitely stands out. As far as a show, as a child watching, a moment that stands out. Yes, but they're all Space Cases related.
Nothing wrong with that.
No. Okay, so I lost my grandmother a couple months before Space Cases premiered, and they had an episode called The Impossible Dram, in which an old man he believes he's a knight. So essentially an old man with dementia, his escape pod latches onto the ship, and the crew now has to deal with this man and his impending death. And one of the characters, Catalina, gets really attached to him, and he's just this wonderful old man who's trying to, in his mind, fight this monster and help out his daughter. And it's just knowing, watching, this older gentleman that this character's attached to then pass, that really, kicked me in the feels for where I was at as a kid. And that's an episode that, I mean, when you're asking, is it a moment that makes your heart happy or makes you happy, that's not one that really makes me happy, but it brings me comfort in a way. The show dealt with dementia and death in a I thought in a very good way, for a sci-fi show for kids, right? I just think that they handled it well. The characters met him where he was at, and it was just a beautiful episode in my mind. So that's one that is maybe not a fan favorite episode, but it's my personal favorite. So that's an S tier episode for me that I will definitely always remember.
Jordan, what about you, bud?
Man, so it depends on how I want to look at it as far as like an impactful favorite moment. It's probably not going to be as profound as Cat's. But mine, Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think with the Laughing in the Dark, that episode in particular. When I first watched it as a kid, I don't know why that episode in particular, but it stuck with me for so many years. Um, that it like burned into my memory to a point where I couldn't remember if this was a thing I had watched or if it was just a dream or what it was. I just always had this memory of this clown with a cigar hiding around a corner. So when I got into high school and Nickelodeon started bringing back some of their old shows and In Reboot was on or was a website still, and you could go and watch old Nickelodeon shows. I rediscovered Are You Afraid of the Dark through that memory. And was able to go back and watch the entire show because I had watched it as a kid, but for some reason I'd never connected that was an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark. I always had thought it was like a movie that I had seen. So for some reason that had led me on this wild goose chase of trying to find it, reconnecting with Are You Afraid of the Dark, rewatching the entire series, which ultimately led me to getting so much more involved in my nostalgia side that I have everything that I have behind me now, and I take part in this podcast. So I think, honestly, if it weren't for that one episode impacting me so much, I wouldn't have come back in such full force to return because the power of nostalgia is such a strange thing. When you see something and you vaguely remember it and you're trying to nail down, like, is it something that's just my memory of it, or is it a real thing? And when you finally start getting those clues, you start finding it and getting closer and closer, and then you rediscover something that you had thought you had forgotten or that was just a memory. It's such a rewarding experience. So that was kind of like a microcosm of like the larger experience that I would have with a lot more shows. But that was like the start, I think.
As a kid, I would have said either Doug's Lucky Hat or Stimpy's Invention. Two very, very different things. One that makes me cackle all the way through, and then one that just makes me feel good all the way through. And then going back as an adult, I still watch those two, but now that's more for nostalgic purposes. But now as an adult, there are other episodes that I really go back to more often that have more of a resonance with me, like Pete and Pete's Farewell Little Viking, which is very, very much about growing up. Or Pete and Pete's Tool and Die, or Alex Mack's Senora Garcia, which are both about teachers. I teach children. I teach youth also in my ministry at my church. And I have very, very much a strong appreciation for teachers. And they are, I remember when I was a kid, my parents would very, very much listen to the teachers. And now seeing how teachers are today, or as regarded today, I'm seeing a whole lot more parents that are siding more with their kids than with their teachers. I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm see more of it. And to see the episode of Tool and Die where their shop teacher had to have a prosthetic hand, which was just a hook. And he was kind of the butt of the joke for a while, but seeing Big Pete not care about shop class. This is ridiculous. I just need to pass this one thing just so I can get done, but I can't do this. This is stupid, and not really trying. And then at the end of it, the teacher talking about, I hate, and then he pulls out that claw. When you have everything available to you, you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. Take full use of what you have while you've got it. And it was very much a very similar message for the Senora Garcia episode, only told differently, but just about the same message. But seeing these episodes as an adult really makes me appreciate the messages that Nickelodeon would give to kids at that time. And it's moments like that aren't just for kids. They're for adults. Kids and parents can watch these shows together and both have something that they can appreciate from it.
Thank you for sharing, y'all. You have brought me down memory lane. Like, now there's all these shows I want to go and watch that I haven't watched forever. Just another question for you guys. When it comes to podcasting, the aspect of getting into podcasting and then getting into the subject of podcasting, is there anything that you've discovered or learned about yourselves personally through this journey so far?
I can say I've learned that being good on camera and being good on a microphone is not as easy as it looks. Unlike Alex, I don't come from a background of acting, so I don't have the best camera presence and stage presence, but I try my best.
You do great.
Yeah. And then trying to be succinct with your points. That's something I've been, not the best with in the past, but as podcasting goes, you want to be able to articulate exactly these feelings that you have in your head, and the emotions that you have in a way that, other people can relate to. And I think through podcasting, it has helped me become more articulate with the way I describe these things and understand them. Through describing and talking about them, I gain more appreciation on my own behalf of why I like them, right? I think that's the biggest thing I've kind of taken away through like learning about how to do podcasting and jump into the world of podcasting / video podcasting wherever we exist in the medium.
Similar to Jorde, I know that I'm better in writing than I am just off the cuff improvising. So especially at the beginning, I had meticulous notes. Like we would share notes, documents, and for myself, I needed to write down exactly what I wanted to say, or I felt like I would blank and I would just ramble on. And I still do that from time to time, but I'm better about being more succinct now and going a little more off book, I guess, and just better. Podcasting has helped me be more in the moment. Instead of trying to pre-plan everything and what I'm going to say and be word perfect about it, or if you miss a talking point, that's okay.
Very much. I have learned I love to talk. Yeah, that's what I've learned.
Welcome to the perfect medium.
I do it a lot. I'll edit my episodes. I'm like, will you ever shut up and let someone else talk, please? But I have learned before the show, before I did podcasting, that I was good at this kind of thing, which I didn't think about before. Because before I started doing the show, I would do Instagram live interviews. And it started just as a means to connect fans to the people that we watched on television and give people an opportunity to ask questions and learn more about these shows that we loved. And that's where it started. And then I started having people comment or send me personal messages. Have you ever thought about doing a podcast? You're really good at asking these people questions, make them feel welcome, let the fans know they're appreciated. And I was like, well, I didn't think about it before, but I'm thinking about it now. But I've always been a very confident individual, but I didn't know that I had a voice or a way to carry a show that people would respond to in a positive way. And apparently I do. Not to pat myself on the back, but I know I wouldn't have a crew of 4 others, two of who aren't here unfortunately today for reasons. I love you guys, but I know I wouldn't have a crew to back me up. I know we wouldn't be going on 7 seasons if it wasn't true. But as I said before I started this very long answer, I love to talk.
You're in the perfect profession for it. It's so refreshing to listen to y'all's podcast. The episode I was listening, I was driving back from Jersey earlier today, and I was listening to the PSA episode, and it was Meg's reactions to them. I felt so seen as a kid. But just one final question for you guys. Is there a subject, an episode of something that is coming up that you can share with us, that you can hint to us about, that you're really excited for?
Yes.
I think I'm going to.
Go ahead.
I think I'm going to copy something that you said during our season overview, Alex, which is that there are so many shows that premiered in 1994 having their 30th anniversary coming up in October alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to celebrate some 30th anniversaries and some shows we haven't talked about before on the podcast.
There's a bunch of 30th anniversaries. Like I can tell you all of them, but we're not going to do all of them. But I mean, there was the
1994 was a busy year.
It was
a really busy year.
because they had the Nickelodeon All-Star Sports Challenge. There's Our Real Monsters. There's Secret World of Alex Mack. There's Gullah Gullah Island. There's Allegra's Window. All within 4 weeks. These all premiered. We cannot cover all of them, but we're going to cover a few of them. You'll have to wait and see. And we also are going to have a few, there's going to be a new contest winner that we're going to get her perspective on, and also a couple game show winners we're going to get their perspectives on. So it's going to be a fun season.
Ooh.
I like that. So, maybe this will be the final question. I'm sorry.
Maybe. That happens to me all the time. Like, okay, well, I can't tell you the amount of times that we've tried to end a call after we've finished an episode, and then we just keep coming up with more things to talk about. It's okay. We're used to it.
Yeah.
Stay here. I was about to say I have another question. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah. No. Okay, good. Okay, so we'll make a deal. This will be my last question, and the next question will definitely be the last overall question.
Last question.
So, which camp do you guys fall in? Because there are the people that are like, all right, the 90s rule, and everything else that's on today for kids absolutely suck. Or do you fall in the camp which is maybe a little bit more nuanced, where it's like, all right, the 90s were cool, and the kid stuff that's on today, maybe I don't vibe with it, maybe I do, but I'm not a kid anymore, and maybe that could affect my perception of it. Like, what is there a certain camp you guys fall under?
Ask the two who don't have children first.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jorde.
Yeah, so I think for me, I would probably fall into the latter camp, where I do think there are shows on for kids nowadays. I just don't think there's the quantity of it. And to be fair, there's the industry's changed, the landscape's changed. YouTube exists, the internet exists in a completely different capacity. But there are shows out there. Like I haven't really watched much of the show, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've caught clips, but it's called Bluey, and I've heard really good things about it. And it has touched on very serious adult points. It connected with people and their children, and brought adults and their children together. So I think there's still all the same potential is out there. It's all just about what the industry decides to focus on, and they're very numbers driven these days and not fashion driven. But I think we're seeing that start to change, especially with like the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles adaptation. I think they did a great job with that, and I think if they bring more of that kind of stuff to the table, they're on the right track. It's just kids have to look multiple places besides the TV nowadays to get their entertainment, especially like video entertainment. The latter camp, I think.
Yeah, I'm with Jorde on this one. I want to keep an open mind about some of the programming that is out there. But again, like I am biased. I love the 90s Nickelodeon, and I don't know if that can be recaptured. Bluey comes close. I've got friends with kids who I've watched a couple episodes with them, and that's quality television. But again, there are other places to go. We've got TikTok, we've got YouTube, so network television has changed. But if you asked me if I wanted to watch an episode of something, a new original programming now on Nickelodeon or 90s Nickelodeon, I'm going 90s Nickelodeon.
I am of everything sucks. That's where I am. But also, my kids are not watching Bluey. I will say I am of the mindset most things nowadays for kids, they're not as cool as they used to be when we were kids. That's not just Nickelodeon. We've heard us sing our praises about 90s Nick, but I mean, pick a network where they had anything for kids. There was so much variety still. I mean, yes, we had Fox Kids, which we've not really talked about, but that was all. There was a lot of superhero stuff.
Oh yeah,
as kids, and there was also ridiculous. I mean, you had like Eek the Cat. Who remembers Eek the Cat? And then you had like Bobby's World and all these other
Bonkers.
wonderful. Yeah, and Reboot, and then Transformers Beast Wars, and so many really cool shows where there was a variety of things, and that's just the animation. If you go with like TV, like the blocks for like TGIF, that was a whole separate block too, with wonderful shows on it, and Boy Meets World and Family Matters and Full House and Step by Step. I mean, so many cool, fun sitcoms that kids could watch with their parents. There was a wide variety of stuff, and now it feels like it's all the same. There are exceptions, and there seems to be more passion behind certain projects. And going back and watching stuff, because again, I have two kids. I have a 10-year-old, I have a 4-year-old. I have been through every season of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. I could name every single episode and every single character. I can listen to 5 seconds and know exactly the episode it is. I have heard it so many times. I can do the same thing with Little Einsteins. I can do the same thing with, oh my gosh, Disney Plus. But no, they're fine. They're fine shows. And again, those are little 2000s, but still, there's so many things that we had when my little one was first born. We watched so much Disney Junior, and they were fine. They were overproduced kid shows, but they were fine. But they weren't as cool as what we had back in the day. So I'm of the mindset, not necessarily that everything sucks, but the 90s were better. They did it better. They wanted to connect better. There was a better variety of really cool things. Now it just feels like everything is honed in very, very sharply to a certain demographic, and they don't change it very much. And you can find 100 different shows that are all the same for kids that are 3 to 5 years old, and then from 6 to 10, you can find like they're all Loud House.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fine. Like, and then Disney and Nickelodeon live action TV shows, you cannot distinct the two. They're all the same wish fulfillment thing now. But and again, they're fine. Kids like them, but it's like, yeah, but did you see what we had when we were kids? We actually had real kids.
Going back to production too. I mean, now they rely on CGI and everything to, overproduce things to make things look realistic in that way. But there's a certain charm, and I still have a really big appreciation for like live action shows and movies from our childhood that use like animatronics and like digital effects. And that stuff is still really fascinating to me. And I think that with the technology that we have now, people are going for the big budget explosions and superheroes, and they are not caring too much about like Jumanji's animatronic crocodile,
Yeah. What about like the guy in the giant rat suit on Beakman's World, and then all the crazy sound effects that they used? I showed everybody an episode of Beakman's World on the latest live stream, and everybody was going, what is this show? What is happening? The cat especially was like, what is happening? What is happening? There's so much happening.
I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think there's also a testament to 90s TV, like when Alex, you're showing your kids television shows and movies that you grew up with, and they love them. So they still hold up, and kids are still interested in them. So it's kind of reaffirming that it's not just the 90s were better because that was my childhood thing. It's like, oh yes, this programming still holds up. It's still quality. Kids would be interested in it if it were on the air today.
The amount of times I've caught my son watching Good Burger on YouTube, or hearing the Salute Your Shorts theme song play from his bedroom. My little one is 4, and his nighttime routine is watching an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, and sleeps all through the night soundly.
Really?
I've caught both my kids acting out the ghastly grinner, and they love it. They absolutely love it, and they wouldn't have known about it if I didn't share this stuff with them.
And that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, if you had introduced it to them. Yeah.
And the only reason they knew about it was because I'm talking about it in my show, and now it's become a thing where, all right, go play in the living room. I gotta go do an episode. What are you gonna talk to? What's the episode about? And then they would start watching it in the living room while I'm doing the episode on it. And that's not to say that they like this better than what's out now. They have a good mix. They watch what's now. They don't really, well, I take that back. They watch YouTube, the content that other content creators are making. They watch more content creators than they do produced things from big companies like Disney and Nickelodeon now. Like, they hardly watch any of that now. They watch other content creators or retro stuff. And that's not an enforced thing on my part. That's just what they prefer. I don't know if that's the thing for other parents, but that's the thing in this house.
Right.
Kat, earlier you said that you do cosplay, and I wanted to ask you, is there a character that you have cosplayed at or you want to cosplay that you haven't gotten to do that you are excited for? And Alex and Jorde, if you cosplay too, I want to know.
I don't cosplay. I dress up for Halloween. I have considered maybe getting into it for certain properties that I think are very cool, but no, they're currently not a cosplayer outside of Halloween.
I don't cosplay. I love it, and I would love to do it. I don't have the time. I will say that there has been a lot of speculation that if I was to cosplay, especially at SplatCon, I would totally have to be Tandy from all that, where Josh Server was dressed as that, dressed as the girl on the Randy and Mandy, and he gave me that vegetable, the vegetables.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
Let's
so
do it.
badly because I love that character. It's my favorite.
I love that.
Oh, yeah. So, favorite character I've cosplayed so far, not a 90s Nickelodeon character at all, but she's just so fun in general, is Missy from Doctor Who. Michelle Gomez's character. I love it so much. And just like putting on that costume, like it's this buttoned up like Edwardian sort of outfit, but because her character is so outlandish and big, it kind of gives me permission. Like putting on that costume is definitely putting on like that mask and assuming the character. Like gives me permission to skip down the hall and cackle at people at convention. Like it frees me up a bit. So she's fun to dress as. As for cosplay, I've been saying I want to do and haven't done yet because of time and money. I really, again, Space Cases, I want to full out do Catalina's Saturnian Rejoicing Festival, head to toe rainbow, and just like prance around a convention hall with bells on, literally, and just keep yelling Zabagaby. Like even if for Pride, I would gladly dress up for Pride too with this costume. But as a kid, I wanted to do that for Halloween, and there was no way that I would have been able to, or my mom would have been able to make any of that. So that's still like a childhood fantasy I've not yet fulfilled, but I think that would be really cool. Just decked out in a rainbow.
I will also add to that because my old job used to have Halloween costume contests, and it was never just a costume contest for me. It was embody the entire character and be that character all day long. And the 2 years I won the costume contest, and I swear it was purely because I was the character all day long, was when I was Captain Jack Sparrow.
Ooh.
And the other one was when I was Ace Ventura.
Awesome.
There you go.
Simple costumes, but if you get the character, to the point where one of the other adults hired me to go to their kid's birthday party because it was all Pirates of the Caribbean and wanted me to be Jack Sparrow for their kid. And they totally believed it. I look nothing like Johnny Depp, but they were like, it's terrible.
Sure, they bought it.
How'd you pull off the hair for Ace Ventura?
A lot of hair gel.
Yeah.
Hair gel. I was up at 4 a.m. getting that hair just right.
There you go. I love that.
It's fun.
Well, hey, it's been a pleasure to have you guys join us. Tell us how people can find you. Podcast platform, social media, everything.
You can listen to us on most podcast apps, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Search for Splat Attack Podcast. You can find us. We do a lot visually. Make Jordy's contributions matter because Jorde makes us look good.
Good.
Yeah.
So if you prefer to watch, head over to our YouTube page. Again, just look for Splat Attack Podcast. You can find us just about everywhere. We've got all kinds of socials. Name a social. We've probably got it. Again, Splat Attack Podcast. It's pretty simple. It's the same everywhere you go.
Love it. Alex, Jorde, Kat. Next time, I think I need to find out what hang up Kat has about SpongeBob. That really got me curious.
It's not Kat that has the hang.
No, it's not me.
Oh.
It's Alex.
Oh.
she has spoken on my behalf, because if I get started, this podcast will not end.
Cat is the messenger. I got it. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, guys. Have a great night. Best of luck. Continue success with your content, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you
us.
so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye bye.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why the email opened up Zoom in my web browser as opposed to the app. So now I'm in the app. So this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh, good. All right. Well, yeah, that was a fantastic chat. Very, very, very deep, complex, interesting, engaging conversation about 90s Nickelodeon. And boy, what is your takeaway?
That was tons of fun. They have a lot of information and stories that I just need to hear more of.
Yeah.
Like I was telling them, the PSA episode got me when I was driving back from Jersey. So I'm just like, okay, now I need to hear more. So I'm just going to binge their podcast. And I suggest everybody who likes the 90s does. And damn it, I forgot another question I was supposed to ask.
I had two more that I wanted to ask, but it was getting so late that I was just like, you know what, maybe next time.
Oh, there we go. I looked at the time. I'm like, I want to ask them, but I know it's going to be a very long answer to this question.
Yeah. And we got a post-show chatter thing we have to record, and I'm not trying to be here till like 3 a.m.
What time is it even?
It is almost 11 o'clock.
So yeah, okay. Well, we made good time. This is still good.
Yeah. So I think, I think we did about almost 2 hours with them. But hey, a very fruitful 2 hours. Personally, I loved their review of Good Burger 1 and 2. I listened to that episode. They did an episode with Phil Moore and somebody else, but Phil Moore, well known as the host of Nick Arcade. They did a Full House retrospective, which was pretty nice. I definitely look forward to listening to their Nickelodeon 45th anniversary episode. I got that on my queue. So, Splat Attack, if you are looking for primarily 90s Nickelodeon, but also other parts of 90s culture, I mean, I've seen, Boy Meets World in there as well. Then check them out wherever you get your podcasts. They are fan-freaking-tastic. And follow us while you're at it. Check out our podcast. I assume that you are listening to it right now. The Delicious Recap. We're on Spotify, Apple, whatever, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Patreon, Reddit, Threads, at Delicious Recap, at the Delicious Recap. You can find us pretty much anywhere. And the deliciousrecap@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, concerns about what you just heard. Andrew, how can people follow you?
You can follow me, and when you follow us, especially on YouTube and the TikTokers, make sure you hit that follow button, but subscribe. You get notifications when we post new stuff. It's a little push for you, but it's a big help for us. But you can follow me on TikTok at Ajay Vandertunt. You can also follow me on all of the other socials at Vandertunt. Just touching. Oh my God, I'm getting tongue-tied today.
It's been a day. It's okay. It's been a day.
Type in Vandertunt, and you will find me. I will come up on all of them. I don't interact on other socials except TikTok. So if you send a message, do it on TikTok, and I will definitely see it and be able to respond to you.
Love it. All right. As I give you a meeting link for our hopefully quick post-show chatter, what is a fine, delicious way to sign off on this wonderful conversation that we had with Splat Attack?
So I just have to say this is going to be deliciousness in a way that I don't know how it tastes, because I was hoping they could tell us how slime tasted, and none of them actually got physically slimed, so I don't know. But the deliciousness of it will still ring.